All right, so our next session is focusing on Brazil, which, despite some challenges, is still a formidable and significant player in the nearshore market. And it's my pleasure to introduce Antonio Moreira and Rakesh Chitradurga.
Well, Stefanini was founded in 1987 in Brazil, and in 1995 it started the growth internationally through Latin America. We established an operation here in the US in 2001 and expand also to Europe and other, as I said, other countries in Latin America, and strength operation also in Mexico. In 2009, we start also to growing in the US, not only organically, but then through acquisitions that allow us to bring more internal capabilities and bring more global, actually, expertise, and adding some new regions, especially Asia, in that case, to our solution to complement the delivery centers that we had already in Brazil. Today, we have over 20,000 employees. We have presence in 34 countries and covering pretty much all the continents. Basically, we provide IT infrastructure, ITO, UC, managed services, and application services, and BPO as well. That's where we start. So we pretty much are very familiar with the evolution of Brazil as an alternative to provide offshore services, and then including with the nearshore term. When we start, nobody, the U.S. market, the international market, really didn't know Brazil or recognize Brazil as an alternative to offshore services. So it was a long way for us to establish and convince also the government to help us to promote Brazil in that sense.
Now, I think Antonio talked to you about the fact that we're a global company. You know, we have 20,000 people, but you know, we came from Brazil. Our strength is in the near shore. We've learned some lessons as we continue to build and work with Brazil. Rite Aid is a major client of ours. We started the contract with Rite Aid. It was about 2009. Conversation that we had with them about managed services, and they said, okay, we're talking about application support. And so I think they talked to a lot of the Indian companies, but then I think finally they came back and said, we want high-touch, near-shore support, right? It's the same time zone. We do have a couple of processes, but we want to make sure that we have the ability to, reach out and establish, same time zone support. Really started with mainframe. We bring in a lot of mainframe expertise out of Brazil. Mainframe resources, as you probably are aware, are a little challenging to find in the U.S. Our ability to provision, find the right resource, leverage talent incubation models out of Brazil was what gave us the opportunity to get our foot in the door with Rite Aid. But since then, I think we've grown a little bit, and I think if you look at additional work that has come our way, we have started to get into helping them with their mobile applications. We build the mobile applications. They're connected into some of the prescription plans and the data that's actually stored on the mainframe. And the way we do that is we've got a team that's local but complemented by our centers out of the Brazilian side. And the interesting part of it is now we have migrated from a conversation about cost to a conversation about helping the business drive revenue. It's a transformation problem that we're now working with the company to help them solve.
In the beginning, the client was a little bit skeptical, evidently, with a new alternative. So we are risking it. It was not something very usual for them. And the ability to understand their needs, also tolerant to risk and culture, was very important to build the trust that we need to start growing the relationship.
The next example I think we want to talk about is it's a medium-sized company. It's a legal firm that does consulting and legal consulting compliance. It's called Alvarez Marsal, and it's actually based out of the New Jersey, New York area. This is an interesting client, and the reason we want to talk about it is that one is it's a medium-sized client. Okay, and there's a market for medium-sized client. There's a lot of these guys that need the ability and touch time, the attention, and the ability to get support out of the same time zone. The other thing about this particular client, which was interesting, and the reason why they considered us, the problem was simple. They had a website. The website was forever changing. It was a real-time and motion problem, right? You've got to change. The customer changes. They have IT. The IT doesn't talk to marketing. The guys really couldn't figure out why they wanted what feature on the website. At the end of the day, the waterfall model didn't really work for them, right? And so they didn't have a process. They didn't have a governance. They didn't have the right process model for that. The ability to take that body of work and transfer that offshore was a problem, because if they handed it over and they lacked the process, the ability to drive that successfully was a huge problem. And so one of the things they were looking for is a vendor that was able to work in the same time zones and work with them in an agile DevOps kind of manner, right? So this is an example that we thought was instructive about the trend in the Brazilian market, right? We've got a team in Brazil, we've got a team here, and they're working with the client, and they work the same time zone hours. It's about +1, when you have, is it the summer? I think it's +1, yeah. But it's a +3 in the winter time. So depending on the time of the year, we have a very effective, real-time, agile model working with this company. One of the reasons we wanted to talk about it is because this is a trend that I think we're seeing a lot more. There's a lot of clients who are talking to us about the nearshore, models out of Brazil and the other countries here. And the reason they're doing it is because it becomes very difficult to do an agile model out of India or China or the Asia Pac. The next one is a case study on Johnson & Johnson.
Actually, it's one of our oldest clients, right? So we have 1 year after the company was founded in Brazil, we start to providing services to them there. We started the operation here in 2001, and in 2002, we could develop a project for them with the developers in Brazil, because at that time, 2002, they were really skeptical, right? So they didn't believe in the beginning that we could do that and make it work, and then we had to prove to them, and they gave us the opportunity, and we had a very successful project. And today we have more people working there in the center there in Brazil.
We do their website, we built their intranet, we also have taken over. We have a whole reporting center of excellence that we're running in the nearshore out of Brazil and India for them. So this is a managed services mature engagement that we have gotten into.
Brazil today, for information and communication technology, is ranked 5th largest in the world with $232 billion size, and it's ranked the 7th largest in IT, right, with $123 billion. And it represents 9.3% of as a growth market. The projections, these are all based in the Brascon and IDC numbers for in 2013. Projections for 2022 is to have 10.7% of GDP from Brazil coming from the ICT and telecom sectors, and double the workforce, the IT workforce, reaching 3 million professionals, and $4 billion in terms of export services for that areas. The idea here is to show that the ICT is very important and strong sector in Brazil. The GDP went considerably down with the crisis, but for the ICT remains stable. That indicates a steady momentum for the ICT despite of all the fluctuations in the GDP of the country.
This is an interesting conundrum. If you look at the economy within Brazil, the tech sector is really healthy. The economy is actually on the downswing, but the tech sector is really healthy. If you look at the mobile and internet penetration out of Brazil, they have been growing tremendously over the last couple of years. But the other thing is unemployment, which should be actually much higher, is much lower now. It's actually on a downswing. And so that tells you a little bit about the fact that there's a talent availability, unemployment is low, and it's a great market.
Another sign that is growing also is the broadband access in Brazil that was in 2013 49%. The average global is 44%, but in Brazil we also have to take in consideration that there are a lot of areas where we don't have the internet users. So the concentration, if you get the areas where we have the higher concentration in terms of universities and economic development and companies, that number goes up to over 80%. That demonstrates that the majority of the active economically population and is highly using internet. And that trend is moving towards to the other less populated pockets. So it's growing into the countryside, in other words.
You know, the ICT sector growing, right? Technology is expanding, right? There's a lot of trained workers. The talent is available in plenty, right? So we thought a little bit about talking about what are the trends, right? And if you look at the market for Brazil and the technology trends in Brazil, the market's not a whole lot different from the US market. The characteristics of the market are a little different. The maturity of the market is perhaps a little different. You know, there's local tax customs, there's local regulations, right, which are very different within Brazil compared to the US market. But some of the trends that we're seeing today, you know, you've got the old legacy. You take over the support, you take over the applications, you drive whether that's packaged or custom, right? Now, the same problems that you have in the US, you have in Brazil too. The growth within the SMAC sector, right? The whole social, mobile, analytics, the whole cloud explosion is very similar to the US. You know, there are these startup incubators within Brazil have exploded on the scene. You know, they are coming out of the universities like Sao Paulo, Minas Gerais, which generate a lot of the tech talent out of that region, and what happens is they spin it off into incubators, social mobile incubators, SEO. You know, they're doing AdWords analysis similar to what Google and some of the other companies here do. And so there's a lot of talent within the analytics spectrum, healthcare spectrum. There's a huge, you know, demand within that space too. The other element, which is very similar to what's happening in the US, is the need for non-linearity. The traditional model was you have a one-on-one replacement. You take one person out of the client and you replace it one person out of the vendor. But I think companies are looking for more. They're looking for value for money. And so the whole question is, how do you employ machine learning? How do you employ autonomy? How do you employ automation to ensure that you get a better return on your investment? You know, you have higher productivity factors coming out of your engagements where you can provide support or development. And so those are certain trends that we can talk about.
Just to emphasize some main advantage we see Brazil and in the nearshore scenario, is not something that we believe and since the beginning, but we develop over the time the understanding from the clients and the feedback also from the clients, right? In terms of cultural affinity and cost attractiveness and strong talent. These are the three main groups that we can discuss. We are close, it's easy and cheaper to go to Brazil today. Time zone, as we mentioned before, is a very strong advantage. Also, we have different areas in Brazil that we can explore also more different talents. The business environment in Brazil is very dynamic. We have professionals with a lot of creativity. The teams that we have working there, they are very interactive and proactive also, right? So bringing ideas and bringing things that they believe that can help in the client business overall. The currency is an advantage. The exchange rate with the devaluation of the reais brought us a lot of more competitiveness for us. So we should see an increase of the contracts and the solutions coming from Brazil and the clients. It's important that in this journey that I was mentioned before, right? So starting from 2001, where nobody knew Brazil, trying to convince also the government to support us. It is important to mention the creation of Brascon, right, the Brazilian Association of Software. Personally, I think that 2004 is a mark in the growing in the Brazil awareness. Brascon during this year has been doing a very significant work with the governments and the private sectors and gathering more and more companies as associates. What makes the result bigger is very important. The members of Brascon today, I remember that when Brascon started, there was only 3 companies. Right? Today we have global companies, American companies, European companies, Indian, Asian companies, Indian companies, right? And also Brazilian companies.
You mentioned something about the currency fluctuations. What we'd like to know is how's that impacted on business? Obviously, short term you might be seeing some gains. Do you think long term in terms of stability there's going to be some issues?
In the beginning, we noticed since 2010, 2011, the dollar started to devaluate and the Rite was right. We saw the costs of our offshore projects going up. The impact in that time for those contracts were evidently significant, but we have to overcome that, and through the mechanisms that we have, like hedging, and also being a global company, we could leverage also some contingency factors to not let the exchange impact significantly the delivery, right? And in addition to that, we all know that we have to have financial balance in the contracts. And the clients that we have working with the delivery in Brazil, they know that there are other factors that are important other than cost. There was a discussions there. The client is a global company, so we try to match, let's say, the invoicing there, right? So we have in the same currency, you don't suffer with any fluctuation. Now the impact, the things are changing again, right? In that sense, and that is bringing a lot of competitiveness, as I mentioned before. We don't expect that is going to be a lot of changes in the next at least 2 or 3 years from where we are now. So we can plan accordingly the duration and the sustaining of those contracts and the financial balance with them. We've seen a decrease also of the new contracts. We are able to keep the ones that we had, but we decrease the cost of the new contracts. That is changing again because being more competitive, we are getting more interested for companies to start again exploring Brazil as an alternative.
What about the political situation? Has that impacted on how clients are responding to Brazilian opportunities?
In reality, in the other day, someone asked me how it's going to be now with a political crisis in Brazil, etc. It's not a political crisis in the sense that Brazil is continuing to be a democracy. Don't have any risk from the political, aspect. What is happening there is the economy, crisis in the economy, but it is not the first one. As we saw here, Brazil has a very strong internal market, right? And that will be able to sustain things. We basically are going to continue having companies growing, investments in education. We don't anticipate any impact in the development of the Brazilian and international companies that are being operating in Brazil or for export services. There is something else that is going on there, is the fact that a lot of corruption that was in the public administration in some sectors are coming to the surface. We see some protests of people. We see some, as I said, those schemes coming up to the surface. That is in reality, and not only in the short term, but long term is positive. Transparency and bringing those things that are corrupting the whole society is always a positive thing. So